Vince Perry, a businessman working in international banking in 1989, didn't know that much about video games, but his son, who was 9 years old, certainly did. The kid had an NES, Nintendo's popular home console. He may also have had a Sega console too, but it's unclear, because when talking about his son's game habit, it's clear Perry doesn't understand the difference. "I had to buy a lot of video games," Perry said in an interview. "A decent Sega or Nintendo costs $55 to $60. Yes, this man called a video game for an NES a Nintendo. I think that will set the tone for the rest of this guy's video game story. Anyway, back to when Action 52 was just a twinkle in this guy's eye." Vince Perry noted that his son's gaming habit was costing him a fair pop, but being a good dad, of course, he got his kid the games he wanted when he could. But one day he noticed his son had got hold of a Nintendo that didn't look like anything the Japanese video game giant would be on board with at all. His son was playing a multi-cart. "I happened to see my son playing an illegal product made in Taiwan that had 40 games on it. The whole neighbourhood went crazy over it," Perry said. Yes, a cart with a whole bunch of games on it was sure to keep gaming kids occupied for far longer and far cheaper than getting games the legit way from a local video store. Honestly, can you blame parents of that era for wanting to save themselves a bit of cash? Let's take this supposed 40-game cartridge. Now, the average price for a game like, say, Super Mario Bros. For the NES would have been about $25 at the time. 40 games at that much would set you back $1,000. This is a no-brainer, even if it is a bit cheeky. Unauthorized cartridges like this were a real problem for Nintendo in the late 80s and early 90s. Some have absolutely insane claims, with labels stating hundreds of thousands of games on one little cartridge. Of course, that would be absolutely crazy even if they were the small size that NES games used to be. Those cartridges take the piss because they are just the same small handful of games listed again and again. Damn it, I was hoping to spend the rest of my life playing 99,999 games and avoiding all my other responsibilities. Exactly which bootleg cartridge Vince Perry's kid had is up for debate. Although he says it was a 40-in-1 cartridge in most interviews, it seems more likely he meant a 52-in-1 cartridge, specifically this one, the Supervision 52-in-1. This seems to have been released again without Nintendo's permission around 1989, which would make it quite a new kid on the block when Perry's son was playing it. We will be seeing the menu screen of the Supervision 52-in-1 again in this video. It was very obviously grabbed and used for Perry's Mad Lad gaming idea to the point where the prototype of Action 52 used the exact same menu. In any case, confident with his idea, our man set to work to take the gaming world by storm. Perry founded Active Enterprises specifically to produce his 52-in-1 idea. That's right, this lad was absolutely not mucking about. But he needed a lot of money to start up the business, and despite leaving a career in banking, he needed more cold hard cash to pay for his plans. Because his plans were, well, intense. This was going to be far more than just a video game. As far as Perry was concerned, his idea was about to all kick off. But if there's one thing Perry was good at, like a lot of bankers, it was bullshitting. As we are going to find out. To secure funding, he'd need to found a business, but doing that is expensive. That is, unless you can dodge the kind of things the government wants you to spend the startup cash on. Things like, taxes. Luckily for Perry, in 1990 the Bahamas made a move to increase its already considerable reputation as a leading financial hub of sorts for businesses worldwide. They passed the International Business Companies Act in January 1990, significantly reducing the cost and complication of incorporating an offshore business on the sun-soaked collection of islands, and thus Active Enterprises. Going offshore with the business, rather than registering it in America, brought with it a bunch of benefits, the main one being, of course, dodging tax. Some sources online have the Active Enterprises company founded in 1989. It seems far more likely that Perry, a shrewd businessman, incorporated it after that Bahamas Business Companies Act passed, although it does seem that 1989 is the year Perry and his business partner got together with their big ideas for taking the video game world by storm. And Perry did manage to silver-tongue his way into the checkbooks of a whole bunch of investors worldwide. Thanks to his overseas banking connections, his private backers came from the likes of Saudi Arabia and all over Europe, and by the end of his quest for startup cash, he had a cool $5 million to play with. It was all go now. Time to get together a team to make Action 52 into a reality, and hopefully make an absolutely bobbing load of cash. Now, the team behind what would become the infamous Action 52 weren't exactly some crack team assembled by virtue of their skills. In fact, they got the gig by chance. Apparently, Perry bumped into one Mario Gonzalez at a Miami recording studio. Gonzalez, a young man working as a sound engineer at the studio, couldn't help but overhear Perry chatting about his plan to make a legal NES multicart. In a ballsy but nonetheless impressive move, Gonzalez recommended himself and his two friends, Xavier Perez and Albert Hernandez, as potential candidates to make the game a reality. After presenting Perry with a Tetris-esque game they'd made, Perry was impressed enough to take them on board. Remember, this man couldn't tell the difference between a Sega and a Nintendo console, so honestly that Tetris game could have been one of the worst games ever made, and he'd probably have chucked money at it. Perry had the team flown out for an intensive week-long course to learn how to use an NES development kit. They were then given 3 months to make 52 video games. Now, even by modern standards, that's a huge ask. There's no doubt the team were eager and had the capacity to be competent game creators. They certainly had the passion, but even the most experienced developers would be hard-pressed to get that amount of games out there in such a short time for a system they had recently only learned how to code for. These poor lads had their work cut out for them, and corners were about to be very much cut to get this legit multicart out to the public. According to the fourth developer, another friend of Mario Gonzalez, who would join the team later on, they used Deluxe Paint and Deluxe Paint Animator to make the game. It was programmed in assembly. The games would be made in a corner of a recording studio where absolutely no sunlight could get in. All 4 developers would spend ridiculous hours working in this soundproofed cell for 3 months. And I do mean ridiculous hours. These young men were putting away upwards of 60 hours a week, and Vince Perry would occasionally pop in and maybe bring them coffee. He didn't even pay the 4th developer, and it's not clear if he paid the other 3. They certainly had some share of the profits written into their contracts, but it's hard to tell if they were even being compensated for their time, while their boss was swanning around the world schmoozing. Now, most sources online record Action 52 as being released in 1991, and that is what the copyright says on the title screen of the game. However, it doesn't appear to have been shown until at least 1992, when Active Enterprises demonstrated Action 52 at the International Consumer Electronics Show in Nevada. In this article for Game Zone Issue 5, game journalist Jeremy Daldry writes that he's not at all convinced by Active's big idea, writing, "I've heard some tall tales in my time, but this one from Active Enterprises just about takes the biscuit." According to him, the NES cart was going to cost $80 and there was only one game on show. In addition, the only magazine review I was able to find of the game was for N-Force magazine in February 1993. Of course, that doesn't mean it wasn't covered elsewhere, but remember, it's not like gaming magazines commonly covered lots of unlicensed games. That being said, it's surprising a cartridge full of legally made games wasn't getting more of a buzz about it. It seems Perry spent his marketing budget on newspaper articles and stopped there. Perry was keen to make sure that the creation of the cartridges would happen on American soil as much as possible. The plastic for the cartridge was produced by one M&M Plastics in Hialeah, Florida. The production of packaging was handled by Caribbean Box Co. in North America, and over in Orlando, American Technologies was manufacturing the electronic internals for the game. When it was finally released, the recommended retail price for this thing was $199. That works out at less than $4 a game. That's dirt cheap for the time. 52 brand new games for the price of a meal deal. Don't mind if I do. Let's have a look at this. Now, why does the title screen play the 1988 hit It Takes Two is anyone's guess. There's not a chance it was used with permission. Is it used because technically all the games are 2-player? Not at the same time, mind you, only by taking turns and competing for a high score. It doesn't even really take 2. You can still play the game if you have no friends, and if you had them in the first place, you wouldn't have after getting them to play this bullshit. Because, yes, spoiler alert, everything about every game on this cartridge is god-awful. The problem here is there's 52 of them, and I'm not sure I can handle playing through each one of them. I need someone who is so tempered by self-hatred that they can tell us about what Action 52 truly has to offer. A real miserable bastard. Okay, so we're establishing that this particular all-in-one cart isn't great. But if you want an all-in-one solution for your favourite magazines, then Readly really is great. So thank you very much to them for sponsoring this segment. I really do love Readly, not just for my own enjoyment, but it's a huge help with my channel. For example, I can access magazines which are essential for inspiration and research. And you can get back issues and current issues. It's great for anything that you're interested in. Plus, there are hundreds of titles to choose from. You can bookmark wherever you want on the go, which is very useful for me. You can read offline, you can navigate easily, and you can read in the desktop app or on your phone or tablet. It's a really good way to get into magazines. Plus it saves an absolute crap ton of space, both on the go, in your bag, or in your house or workspace. Trust me, this is much better than doom scrolling any day of the week. At the moment, you can grab 2 months free as well and cancel at any time using the link below. So frankly, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's better than playing Action 52, which we'd best get back to.
I'm busy.
Octavius.
Oh, hi, Nostalgia Nerd. You alright? Oh, let me guess. You want me to review a crappy game for you, yeah?
Well...
Look, I can't do it, mate. I need some other kind of shtick. When I was driving the other day, I got flashbacks to big rigs over the road racing and tried to scale the side of a McDonald's. And every time I'm on the motorway, I get flashbacks to the soundtrack of Club Drive. That squeaking, honking trumpet. Oh, you're just gonna have to get someone else to help you out, yeah? I heard you're in pretty well with that guy who... What's his name? The one who eats tinned chicken from a tin.
Well, I've got your son.
Have you? No, he's still here, unfortunately.
No. Your other son.
Not my soft son.
He's having a lovely time. Because you're a little coconut boy. Look at him. Jesus Christ!
You can't keep stealing my pets every time you want to blackmail me. Where is he?
Come on.
Where are we going?
Just get in there.
Look! Peter! Peter! Oh God! Action 52! Peter, let me out now!
Just play the games and review them really quick, okay?
Crappy games, my eye faces! Fine, I'm not about to show you each and every one of the games because I've already covered each and every one of these sodding games in my own video about Action 52, which I will get Peter to link in the description. It's just that if I have to write about every single game on this god-awful cartridge again, I am going to murder the first person I see, and that wouldn't be great because I would not do well in prison. I would be everybody's bitch. The only solely 2-player game on this cartridge is, oddly, the very first game, Fire Breathers. It's 2 dragons frying each other. You can't play a 1-player version, there's no computer player. So right away, this is a waste of time. Hey Peter, do you want to play Fire Breathers with me?
Absolutely not. Such a solid, spherical rat. Such a ball of a rat.
Why is the only game unplayable without 2 players the first on the entire massive list? I can only think it's because logically, you and a friend will play it together first before you realise how much of a pile of garbage the entire cartridge is. The sprites for the dragons are cute though, aren't they? This is one of the games that looks like effort was put in. But that's all I've got here, and yeah, it's only going to get worse. For a start, the second game, Star Evil, just straight up kills you right off the bat. How are you supposed to know that you need to avoid something as soon as the game starts? I don't have the reflexes of a jet fighter pilot. Sometimes I don't even realise milk has gone off until I'm already halfway through a bowl of cornflakes. Look at this on level 2. Look, absolute troll! Come on! So every time you get taken back to the menu screen, the cursor will be on game 5. This is because that's how the bootleg cart Active Enterprises totally nicked the title screens from was set up. Remember, the 3 lads, and eventually the 4th, who were making this, had 3 months to make 52 games. I'll let you off, lads. Vince Perry, though? No, bad Vince. Bad marketing-minded Vince.
This is by id Software, one of the first games that has mouse look in it, so a true 3D world that you can look around in. You have to activate it using, the command line though, it's not one of the normal options. But one day you'll be able to play this. So, it's 15 years or older. You're not old enough.
Game number 5 is Ooze, and it's disgusting. You're a guy jumping around on snot. No, I'm not even joking, look, the monsters are snot. The background, it's snot. Even the title screen is Snot. Yeah, this is one of the 2 games that has a title screen. Look at... I did want to blow this game into a tissue and never talk about it again, but I have to mention it because there's some interesting factlets about it. If this kind of thing is interesting to you, I don't know. 1. This is the game used in the promo material for a proposed Action 52 competition. Completing the game would enter you into a prize draw. The hilarious thing about that is that the game crashes somewhere in level 3 and can't be completed. And that wouldn't have been a thing that the developers put in on purpose, by the way. Seriously, by all accounts, these guys were really trying to make some decent games. The second thing about Ooze that's kind of interesting is the last game on the cartridge was originally going to be one Action Game Master. After the characters of the Cheetah Men were made up and a game made for them to replace that slot, Action Game Master was apparently reworked into Ooze, and also another game on the cartridge, Robbie and the Robots. The music in Ooze also came from the originally planned game Action Game Master. The music of Ooze is interesting because you first hear it and you think, oh, this is alright, and then you keep listening to it and you think, oh, no, I was wrong. And the third interesting thing about Ooze is Active Enterprises put a flyer in with some distributions of Action 52 saying that if you complete Ooze, you can unlock 2 secret extra games. No, that doesn't mean there's actually 54 games on Action 52. The flyer is referring to the games Jigsaw and Alfredo and the Fettuccinis, which is shortened to Alfredo in the Fettic on its title screen. Both of those games are here in the game selection list. That's because they were meant to work, but for some reason, when you select them, Action 52 will crash, and you're just going to need to reset the NES. So, what did Active Enterprises do to hide the fact that 2 of the advertised 52 games you're paying for don't even sodding work? Chuck in a flyer, lying about them being only accessible by secret means. Even if that was believable, why then have these secret games listed on the game select screen like an absolute prick tease? You know, I am furious about this blatant lie. You just know some poor kids spent hours of their precious childhood pricking about on this snot-covered game trying to find a way to access 2 games that their parents had already sodding paid for. The flyer says Ooze is game number 6 and then corrects itself in the next paragraph. The spelling errors are rife, not just in the game, but in the damn instructions. Well, due to the wonders of emulation, we can play those 2 secret games now, and they are not worth it. Jigsaw is a terrible, terrible game. Alfredo and the Fettuccinis is a terrible, terrible game. Both are lazy side-scrolling platformers with dinky enemies and barely any actual action. If I was being nice, I'd say Alfredo and the Fettuccinis is better, but just because it's cuter. Look at this chef getting levelled by macaroni. There is something to be said for that. That is funny. By the way, that other flyer, it tells you how to exit a game without needing to reset the NES. It literally makes out that a standard feature is some kind of exciting secret tip. Again, it's because they forgot to put that basic information in the instruction book. So they were trying to save face. When I say they, I mean Active Enterprises and just Vince Perry. It was Vince Perry.
You get to play as lots of different characters. This used some of the Super Nintendo special modes, like Mode 7, which was really quite revolutionary at the time, especially for a 16-bit console, mate. Got a battery-backed memory as well, so you could save your progress, your best times.
Look at the enemies in this game. What is going on here? It's an utter party of franticness in there. I want to join in. Non-human. What? Sorry. What? I remember this one now. Yeah, I'd scrubbed it out of my memory for my protection. This guy in the game Fuzz Power is the only playable character that shows up more than once. In Fuzz Power, he's bouncing along avoiding hair-related paraphernalia, because he enjoys looking like a bonsai trifula tree, thank you very much. Trifula tree, you know, the trees from the Lorax. It's okay though, because later on, presumably after getting back from rehab, he shows up again in Mashman. Clean shaven and with his hands in his pockets as he bounces along some weird woodblock world avoiding things. It is nice to see he's cleaned himself up a bit though. I do hope his life gets better. Alright, okay, let's go on to time warp tickers.
Doing alright in there, Octavius? Octavius? Oh! Games are too crap! No! Ah, no! In there!
Alright, fine. I'll play some other games.
What the flip is this?
Time Warp Tickers is just bizarre. I'm not happy to play it. You're a pair of fingers strutting along in some insane budget Alice in Wonderland with God knows what flinging itself at you. You defend yourself by jumping over them or doing this dinky little flick, which makes the enemies turn into the word time, complete with an almost nervous question mark. I don't know what's going on. I'd say it's got obvious the small development team was struggling with ideas when they made a literal pair of fingers into a video game character, but honestly you could say they were struggling way before this. Time Warp Tickers is game number 48. By this point you've already played as an Action 52 logo, a tiny guy on a carpet, a nondescript spec, a man who is 60% foot, various poorly drawn spaceships, and whatever the hell the thing in non-human was. Time Warp Tickers is one of the games made by that fourth developer who joined the team later. He has a small blog website which I will link in the description. This lad started out just hanging around with 3 Action 52 developers while they were working, taking them snacks and just generally chilling. He was fascinated by the process and ended up learning how to use deluxe paint. This lad started working insane hours for absolutely no pay on Action 52. He was eventually paid, he reckons, about $1,500. That's for more than 2 months of 60+ hour weeks helping to make Action 52. He was very young and thus taken advantage of. Yet another reason to be a bit miffed at Vince Perry. Anyway, the reason it says time when an enemy is killed or our playable fingers are hit is this fourth developer made a Miami dance song with Action 52's first developer, Mario Gonzalez. In this song, there was a sampled voice saying the word time. This fourth developer was also, as he says on his blog post, just into a time theme at that point in my life. There you go. Mystery solved. Let's get the fuck out of this game. Most of the games are either a space-scrolling shooter, usually set in space, or a god-awful platforming game. The standout space shooter has got to be Operation Moon, which is the most offensive-looking game Action 52 has to offer. I challenge anyone to look at this putrid mess of a colour palette for more than 5 minutes and not come away with the top layer of their corneas hanging off.
The collision detection is awful. It's like, sometimes I smash, sometimes I don't.
Critical bypass! That sounds absolutely critical! Oh God.
What the hell is this?
Aside from Not Human, which is, as Octavius said, an absolute horror party, the standout platformer would probably be Billy Bob. It's the only one with any fluid animation that might remind you of early Prince of Persia games. The problem is getting across some of the screens is insanely difficult because you need to time your jump so precisely and usually from the previous screen. If you don't, you're falling into a pit, and yes, like most of the other platforming games, Billy Bob can't take fall damage. It's a shame because this one starts off looking almost promising, but that might just be because all the other games so far have been utter bobbins. I'm in a really, really bad mood now.
Good lord, what the hell is going on? Is this literally again, how is this even again, what is going on with this? This is not playable. This doesn't work, none of this is a game. This is god awful. Whose idea was this?
There's only really one puzzle game on this cartridge, although calling it a game is a long stretch. Myong, where you move an A52 logo around, which by the way is never seen elsewhere on the cartridge, so calling it a logo is also a stretch. Some of the squares blow you up. How do you know which squares? You don't, so, that's fun. Then there's Crazy Shuffle, which the instruction book calls an educational puzzle game. Is this a puzzle game? The music is frantic and you're running around a maze picking up what look like crucifixes. The instructions say this is a picture matching game, and it could be if the picture you're matching to the screen is an especially troubled child's drawing. Actually, that's another point. The instruction book very often says stuff about games that either isn't true or sounds more like it's about another game entirely. For example, Fire Breathers, which is that 2-player dragon game I refused to play with Octavius earlier, Features just 2 dragons, one played by you and your long-suffering friend. The instruction says you must kill the dragon riders, plural. Unless it's inviting you to kill yourself, which at this point is tempting, there's been a mistake here. Instructions for Alfredo says you're racing against the clock and you get the runaway pasta back into a pot. But all the chef does is slam the carby bastards into the floor, which would suggest, if he's wanting to keep that hygiene rating, he's not going to serve them. And also there isn't a clock anywhere. The level just ends when it feels like it. Instructions for French baker are not relevant to the game but sound like a euphemism. You may try to keep the cookie patterns pounding and the bread rising, but it's not as easy as it sounds.
Octavius, let me out of here.
No.
Shooting Gallery promises quick draw and a final shootout with bad guys, but in the game itself you're just popping shots at various panicking animals and that's it. Bits and Pieces is meant to be a game where you make solid lines out of various sizes and shapes, so obviously Tetris. But the actual game is a jump-suited Nosferatu jumping over a short-wearing werewolf and humanised snot blobs. There's plenty more examples, but this video has already gone on long enough. It's very obvious not a single game on this cartridge was play-tested. The guys making it didn't have a chance to get that deadline met. They slapped on the lights, camera, action intro and called it a day. As a result, you've got glitches, inconsistent play mechanics, random instances of things that normally kill you not killing you, random instances of the scenery being in the way as soon as the level starts and killing you, boss battles where the boss just forgets to show up, whatever this bullshit is, and characters so poorly drawn it's hard to know where they start and where they end. Even if they were functional, none of these games stand alone as games in their own right. They all have at best a few minutes of playtime, so it fails even as a multi-cart. The Supervision 52-in-1 was shady, but it had games that could occupy a kid for hours, and at about $4 a game, not a single one is worth it. I wouldn't pay you 10p for a single title on here. All the games really are a barely functional chore, and the worst thing is there's 52 of them. Active Enterprises were all about quantity, not quality, and they certainly got quantity right. Action 52 was planned for the SNES too, but thankfully that never happened. However, in 1993, a version was made for the Genesis and released in America only. An actual development company did this one, and it's noticeably more functional. Octavius did a video covering every single game on that version. The games are nowhere near as bad or even as charming as this NES version, but if you want to watch Octavius torture themselves, the link is in the description. But there's more we need to talk about. Game number 52. Yes, the infamous Cheetah-Men. And we'll be talking about that in another video because it really does need its own.
Okay, that's enough.
Oh God, no, coconut, don't nibble that.
Don't nibble the acorn atom.
Oh. What the hell, Stuart? Okay, stop. What about a truce and we both review Cheetah-Men? Can you get off me now?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
All right, let's do this.
Okay.
Now kiss.
Why are you still here, Stuart?
Yeah, what the shit?
Why are you still here, Stuart?
Yeah, what the shit?